Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. I'm excited to have Adam Stokes on the show. He's the author of 3 different books here that we're going to be talking about. He's the first Black apostle we're going to have on Gospel Tangents. He leads a Church of the Elijah Message. I'll let him give you the official name of his church because there's a few different ones of them. And we're going to talk a lot about his church and get acquainted with it. So you won't want to miss this conversation. Check it out. Welcome to Gospel Tangents. I'm excited to have an apostle from, and hopefully I get your name. I'm just going to call it the Elijah Message Church, and then you can tell me the official name. So go ahead and tell me who you are and what church you belong to.
I'm Adam Stokes. I'm an apostle, elder, and quorum member for the Church of Jesus Christ, the Assured Way of the Lord. That's a really super huge title. There's a whole history behind that, which we'll probably talk about at some point over the course of our time together.
Okay, because I thought it was called the Elijah Message. Did it used to be called the Elijah Message? Because it sounded like there was a merger there or something.
Yes, there was. There's a Church of Jesus Christ with the Elijah Message. There's actually 3 different churches, and there's 3 different what we call Fettingite or Dravite churches. The Church of Jesus Christ with the Elijah Message, and those are the people who actually kept the trademarked name. Then there's another group, Church of Jesus Christ with the Elijah Message. We call them the 608 group because their headquarters are on a street which is numbered 608. They have a church there. And then there's us, the Assured Way of the Lord, which was formed technically in 2003. And so there's kind of a history of some divisions within my tradition, beginning in 1994 with the death of our founder, basically, W.A. Draves. And after he died, right before he died, there was some stuff going on in the church about leadership issues, who was to head the church, and then that kind of all came to a head after he died, and so you get these different branches. So you have the Church of Jesus Christ with the Elijah Message, Incorporated, and then you have my group, the Assured Way of the Lord, which consists of most, not all, but most of the apostles who were apostles in the quorum at the time of Brother Draves' death. Now, some of those apostles have passed on, but most of them are part of the Assured Way. The several others are part of some of the other Elijah Message churches.
Okay. So I don't know if you saw my go ahead.
I didn't mean to confuse you too.
Oh, no, that's good. I was just going to say, I don't know if you saw my interview with John Hamer. By chance, did you see that one?
Yes.
Did John get it right? Did we get it right? You're the Fettingite part of it?
Yes. So we accept the Fettingite messages, which were the first 30 messages in our scripture, the word of the Lord, and then there's 50 to 120 other messages that were given to W.A. Draves from around 1937 up until 1994. And one of the other Elijah Message churches, the other one I was talking about, they have claimed, which we reject, but they have claimed to receive new messages from John the Baptist. So they have about 138 messages, I believe.
Okay. Because I want to dive deep into that history. I found it fascinating. But before we do that, let's dive into Adam Stokes' history. Because you didn't grow up in the Restoration, right?
No, I did not. I grew up American Baptist, Black American, African American Baptist, from childhood and all the way up until my college and grad school years. In fact, I went to seminary wanting to become a Baptist minister. I was a licensed Baptist minister at the time at my home church. Shout out to Zion Baptist of Baltimore, Maryland. I was a licensed Baptist minister, and I was on the way to be ordained. And I kind of had a faith crisis, to put it lightly, and I wasn't part of any faith tradition. I kind of hung out with the Quakers a bit, but I wasn't really part of any faith tradition for quite some time.
Now, was your dad a Baptist preacher as well, if I remember right?
My dad actually had, so my mom, I got the Baptist part from my mom's side. My dad really didn't have any religious affiliation. He was nominally Catholic, and he was very culturally Catholic. But he had served in Vietnam. He had been in law enforcement in Baltimore, and I think, Rick, that all of those experiences how can I put it? He wasn't much of a faith man or a spiritual man. He was very practical and on the ground, and I don't think he believed that human beings were good enough to have any type of divine spark in them or to have any interaction with any type of God. So he had seen kind of the worst of the worst.
Okay. All right. So you grew up Baptist. I know you have at least 2 divinity degrees. Tell where those came from and how those are involved in your spiritual journey.
Absolutely. So I have a degree in religion, a BA in religion with a focus on Judaic studies, looking mainly at the Hebrew Bible. And then within that, to make it more complicated, I have a minor in Islamic civilization. And then, so go figure. I don't know Arabic, but I did minor in Islamic civilization in college, which was quite a time. That was right after 9/11, so early 2000s, so quite a time to do that. And
was that at St. Joseph's in Philadelphia there? Is that right?
This was at Duke University.
Oh, so you went to Duke?
Yeah, went to Duke for...
Go Blue Devils, huh?
Yes, love the Blue Devils. So
now, are they a Baptist university? I can't remember what's their...
No, their affiliation is Methodist.
Oh, okay.
So there was a famous Methodist theologian, Will Willimon, who was head of the Duke Chapel when I was there. But their divinity school is really heavily Methodist. And when I went on to do my PhD, which didn't actually quite work out, so I never got the PhD. I went to Princeton Seminary for that, but I knew a lot of Duke people went there as well, and they were all Methodist. So Duke is heavily Methodist. I did more successfully get my MDiv from my Master of Divinity from Yale Divinity School, and that was where I met Mormons for the first time.
Okay, so you got your bachelor's at Duke and then your master's at Yale.
Yep, and I have another master's in library science, completely unrelated to anything religious, from Clarion University. Just got that one.
Where's Clarion?
Clarion, I think, is, I've actually never been on the campus. It was a total online program. Okay. I think it's Western Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh.
Okay. That's Sidney Rigdon country.
So my advisor was like, "Are you coming to commencement?" And I was like, "Well, it's like 5, it's 5 hours away. I don't really think so." So, yeah.
It's funny. When I got my master's degree, I was like, I don't know if I'll go to commencement. And my dad's like, "No, you're going because I'm coming."
That was kind of how my mom was. So I was like, "Mom, you're almost 80 years old and you can't walk very well. So, don't worry about it. It's an online program. They'll mail me the degree."
Well, I had another library science major, Trevin Hatch. I don't know if you got to see that one.
Yes.
We might be doing some back and forth because it sounds like you and he kind of have some different opinions on the Bible, so that'll be interesting.
Oh, yes. So I'm friends with him on Facebook.
Okay. Well, very good. All right. Okay, so you've only got 2 master's degrees? Only
2 master's degrees, yes.
And
only
you started a PhD at Princeton, but you just gave it up?
It didn't work out. Yeah. So.
Okay. All right. Well, very good. And so you were at Yale, and how were you introduced to the Book of Mormon?
So my introduction to the Book of Mormon came years after Yale. I knew a little bit about it from my friends at the Divinity School. Shout out to Carl Craney, who is at, I believe he's at American University. But I didn't know anything about the Book of Mormon. My interest in the Book of Mormon came years later. I was still doing my PhD, and there is a conference that basically all biblical scholars go to, all biblical students go to, all religion students go to in the U.S. I'm sure you've heard of it, the Society of Biblical Literature, American Academy of Religion. So they have a conference every November. And at one of these conferences, BYU had a kiosk, and they had a copy of the Joseph Smith translation on CD. I think I still have it over here somewhere.
Of the Bible?
Of the Bible, yes. And I was really interested in that at the time because I was really interested in the history of interpretation of the King James Bible. So basically how it's basically influenced Western civilization and what people have done to it over the centuries, and the Joseph Smith translation being a really cool example of that. Now, I had no religious affiliation at the time. Like I said, I was kind of hanging out with the Quakers, but not really. I wasn't officially with any group. So this seemed curious to me. And so I bought the CD and put it into my laptop, and I was just blown away, Rick, because I was coming to it at first just as an example of American interpretation, and something about it just really grabbed at me. And I think that, and other people have asked me this, and I've had Ben Schaefer on the show, he's asked me this as well. I think that the way that especially the first 10 chapters of the Joseph Smith translation kind of provide an alternate story of Adam and Eve, where it's not so much, I'm coming from the Baptist tradition, so we're like the Calvinists in regard of total depravity. So Adam ate from the apple and we're done. We're completely done as human beings. And the Joseph Smith translation for me challenged that and said, no, Adam wasn't done when he ate the apple. In fact, God continued to have a relationship with Adam. God, in Genesis chapter 6 of the Joseph Smith translation, forgives Adam, and he exalts Adam to the priesthood. And so it was a completely different understanding of that story than what I had ever been exposed to. And that got me interested in reading more Latter-day Saint and Restorationist literature. And so I remember this day very well. This was exactly to the day, Rick, the 10-year anniversary. No, sorry, not the 10-year anniversary. The 1-year anniversary of my wife and I being married. The 10-year anniversary was last year. But this was, this was the 1-year anniversary of my wife and I being married, 2013. Yep. And we were at a Marriott hotel in Princeton. And she went out to get Chinese food. And I stayed and I opened up, because I usually have like a Gideon Bible and stuff. I just like to see what things are in there.
Not at the Marriott.
Not the Marriott. And I realized, I learned later that you Mormons own that. So I saw this, I got this, there was this Book of Mormon there. And so I picked it up and I started reading, and I had this mystical experience with the book. And I've told other people this, and I'll gladly say it to you, Rick. I was basically drawn into the world of the Book of Mormon for a few seconds. You can believe that. You cannot believe that I was in the jungle and there were Lamanites. I was in, not the jungle, the forest, and I was in. Some Lamanites were running by. I will go on oath as saying that. You can take me to court. You can psychologically evaluate me, and I will say exactly what I'm saying to you right now. And I knew. Point of all this is that I knew that the Book of Mormon right then and there was true. I didn't know anything about the Book of Mormon besides that it had been translated by Joseph Smith, and it was Mormonism's sacred text. I didn't know anything else about it, but I knew right then that it was true, and that made me want to seek out groups that believed in the Book of Mormon. And so there was, right down the street, I kind of have a real, this goes into a real kind of complex history with my relationship to the Restoration. There was a Bickertonite church down the street that I
didn't expect that. Wow.
So that I was going to for a while. And
is this in New Jersey, or where is this?
This is in Jersey. Yes, this is in. This is Pennsylvania at the time. My wife and I were living in PA at the time. This was near Oxford Valley, Pennsylvania. I'm trying to think of the town. It's right on the tip of my head. There's two Bickertonite churches in the area. There is one in New Jersey in Mount Holly. That's not too far from where my wife and I live now. And then there's another one. I'm blanking on where. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on where it is.
It's probably near Philadelphia, though, roughly.
It's in Philadelphia. Yes, the suburbs of Philadelphia.
Okay.
Yep. So I started going there, but honestly, one of the things that stopped me from going, it was a really long drive. So I lived in Bensalem, and this was all the way in Oxford Valley. I don't know how familiar you are with the Philadelphia area.
So Adam, believe it or not, my dad grew up in Pedricktown, New Jersey.
Okay. Oh,
And my aunt lived right outside Philadelphia in Pennsgrove, I think it was.
I
And
teach. I taught high school in Pennsgrove
that's
for
what I
several
thought.
years.
Yeah, yeah. So I have like family history there, but I haven't spent a lot of time in that area. But yeah, I knew because you said you teach at Pennsgrove, right?
I used to teach at Pennsgrove, not anymore, but
Yeah.
yes, I do.
Oh, okay. And so, because I knew that, and I was like, oh, that's my dad's neck of the woods. So that's interesting. So,
Yep, yep, I know that area very well.
so wait a minute. So you pick up the Book of Mormon in a Marriott hotel, and you don't find an LDS church. You find a Bickertonite church right off the bat.
Yeah, I was. It was really weird at the time. Yeah, people have asked me about that. I was really kind of looking for convenience, and there wasn't an LDS church really kind of in the Ben-Salem area, to my knowledge. And also, my wife was like, my wife is Catholic. Our two boys, they're kind of raised in Catholic education, and my wife was like, "I'm not sure about these Mormons." Now she's very supportive, but at the time she was like, "Is this just Is just a phase? I don't want you to get baptized into the Mormon Church and not and just have it be like a fad." So I don't know if you're sincere about this or not. So. It's interesting. The Bickertonites do a lot of proselytizing in the area, so people know them pretty well. They're very prevalent in like the Italian American communities in the Philadelphia area. So I think that's how I got to know where they were. I think there was like some pamphlet or something or some advertisement, and I started going there. But in my laziness, 45 minutes was just too far away, and then I learned of a Community of Christ church, which was literally down the street from me, so about 10 or 15 minutes away, and I started going to that. And it's kind of funny, Rick, I was the youngest member of that congregation. Most of the people were in their 50s or 60s, but it was a lovely congregation, really, really amazing people, really wonderful people. I had a baby boy at the time, my first son, Grayson, and they would, say, bring him. So I bring him, and they would play with him, and give him treats and stuff like that. So I got really close with this church. They shut down actually a couple years back because of COVID, and a lot of their congregation has died out. It wasn't very big anyway. It was maybe like 15 people, 15, 20 people.
Oh, it's really tiny. Wow.
Yeah, so really, really small. Interestingly enough, a much more kind of conservative RLDS church versus the mainline Community of Christ Church
Okay.
in its doctrine, in its beliefs. So they all believed in the inspired version, the Joseph Smith translation, the Book of Mormon, and the Doctrine and Covenants. And the pastor would preach out of the inspired version of the Bible. So they were a wonderful church. And so you're probably wondering how I got from there to the Elijah Message Church.
Well, yeah, and
Well,
I'm still trying to figure out how the LDS Church has just missed the boat in all this. 'Cause BYU, Marriott Hotel, like that's as LDS as you get, right?
yes. And I was definitely interested in the LDS. Like I said, I was trying to find places that were close to me. So there are, I know for a fact, there's an LDS meeting house like really like 5 minutes away from where we live now. But at the time, I wasn't sure where the places were. And like I said, my wife had some reluctance with me going to any of these churches.
Well, and I want to understand a little bit more because, well, you grew up Baptist, but at this time you were kind of Quakerish, I guess. So you weren't
Kind of quickly, yes.
and you went on to become a licensed Baptist minister, right? Is that
I
right?
was a licensed in college and at the beginning of divinity school. Yes.
Oh, so you had already been licensed in college.
Yes.
And so, and maybe this is just a Mormon stereotype, because we just think, I mean, I went on my mission to the South, and it's very evangelical, and
Yeah.
Mormons are evil, and we're devil worshippers, and,
Yes. Yes.
everything. Like, and so I just figured
My mom to this day
most
sends me literature because she knows I'm apostle in a restoration branch, and she will send me
like
books
God
about
maker
why the book.
stuff.
Yes, yes, and how the Book of Mormon is a fraud and everything. I'll get
Right,
that. That's
right.
my Christmas. That's my Christmas present. Like the past 10 years already.
Brother. So weren't you like, I don't know if indoctrinated is the right word, but like that first time you met the BYU guys, weren't you like, hey, stay away from me? you know?
I was actually, you know what? I was pretty, like I said, I had Mormon friends in divinity school. So I didn't go to the BYU kiosk until I was doing my PhD at Princeton. So I already had really good friends, Carl Craney, who I mentioned before. So I knew a little bit. I mean, I had good relations with the LDS Church. So looking back on it, like I said, I think it was just convenience. I was looking for. I saw this ad for the Bickertonites with the Book of Mormon, and so I started going to that church, and then the Community of Christ Church was even closer, right down the street.
Oh wow. And then so there wasn't a lot of indoctrination in the Baptist when you were licensed as a Baptist minister in college. They weren't like, oh, here's Mormonism 101 and why they're all messed
Oh
up.
no, they absolutely did. So I mean, as Mormons and Catholics were bad and stuff like that. So there was that. But I don't pay too much. I mean, I try to, when I entered into college, I was a very kind of fanatically religious person, which I think contributed later on to my faith crisis. I was right and everybody else was completely wrong. But I learned a lot from that, and I think by the time the end of college and definitely divinity school, I wasn't so intolerant as the traditions I grew up in had kind
Okay.
of taught me to be. So I was much more open to other traditions and other religions and other branches of Christianity than I was growing up when I was a teenager, growing up in the Baptist church.
Well, and let me just add one more thing. Occasionally we have audio only listeners, so they might not know that you're African American or black. And by the way, you're my first black apostle. I need to mention that.
Oh wow! Okay, okay.
But was that an issue as well that the LDS Church especially discriminated against blacks until 1978 Revelation? Was that something that you learned growing up?
Yes, yes. So I learned that I learned that there were no blacks in the LDS Church until 1978. And hey,
Wow.
Rick, I have an old school story for you. So I grew up in Baltimore, like I mentioned, and in where I lived in Baltimore, near Northern Parkway, if you go down towards the old Memorial Stadium, the old stadium where the Orioles used to play, there is an LDS meeting house there. And the word around just in the black community at the time was don't go to that meeting, don't go to that place because they hate black people there. So that was what I was told as a kid. So maybe subliminally, that was one of the reasons I didn't reach out more to an LDS church. But I think for the most part, it was just convenience. But for me, I read the Book of Mormon, and when I had my experience, I was like, this transcends, race, this transcends color, and this is God speaking to me. And I think one of the things that moved me so much about the Book of Mormon was that for years I felt like God had been like completely silent in my life. I wasn't hearing anything. I tell people this. I had an experience. I used to go to a Christian camp for InterVarsity. They're a really cool Christian group that's on college campuses, and people used to the other students. There were students that would come to this camp for the summer. It was in Rockbridge County, Westmoreland, Virginia. Same
Uh-huh.
place as Stonewall Jackson, Robert E. Lee. But it was this camp, this Christian camp, and students from UNC would come. Students basically all over North Carolina would come to this camp. I don't know why you'd have a camp in Virginia for North Carolina students, but it is what it is. But I remember the students were saying, they could feel the spirit, they could feel all this. They were having, these mystical experiences. And at the time I didn't feel anything. And it was one of the things that facilitated me kind of having the faith crisis later on. And when I read the Book of Mormon, it was validation not only of Joseph Smith, but I felt like, Joseph Smith talks about God speaking again in his time, when all the churches said that that God wasn't speaking anymore. And I felt on a very personal level, it was the same with me. I felt like God was speaking to me again after so many years of things being really silent.
No, that's really cool. That's really cool. All right, so Bickertonites, then Community of Christ, and then
Elijah Message.
Did that die out while you were there? Like COVID hit? Is that when that hit, or was it before that?
No. I started. I started conversing with elders and apostles in the Elijah Message Church, the Assured Way, around 2017. So I was still within the Community of Christ. And one of the reasons that I did that was because outside of my home church, and I mentioned that it was very traditional RLDS. So the three standard works, inspired version, Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenant, all inspired, revealed to Joseph Smith the prophet by God. But I found very little support for kind of that view, which was my own view, within the larger Community of Christ. And I entered the Community of Christ knowing that this was the case. I knew all about what happened in the 1980s with kind of the drift towards a more liberal view. And in many ways, I was okay with that. The Community of Christ, I've mentioned this before, they really emphasize peace and pacifism. And that was one of the things that drew me to the Quakers. So I was like, this is really, this is cool. This is something that I really agree strongly with. But then the more I read the literature of Community of Christ, the more it seemed, at least in my opinion, in my humble opinion, that the Book of Mormon, and to some extent the Doctrine and Covenants, but not quite, but the Book of Mormon and the inspired version really didn't matter to them anymore. That was the inspired version was being replaced by the NRSV, the Revised Standard Version, which is a great translation, by the way. I love it. But for me, the inspired version was something very special. And it seemed like the Book of Mormon, a lot of kind of the critical views of the Book of Mormon is just being an invention of Joseph Smith, as being a racist text, which was something that was said to me when I was a kid, in the mentions of Mormonism within the Black Baptist tradition. All those things I found myself not being able to agree with, and that drew me to looking at another tradition. And by chance, I started a conversation with one of the apostles in the Elijah Message Church, Mike Greenwell. He's passed now. He passed a little bit after I was ordained an elder in the church. And I started talking to him for about 2 years. Him and another apostle, one of my dear friends, Richard Johnson, came to our house. They flew all the way from Kansas City, Missouri, and Iowa to see us. And I just had wonderful conversations talking to them about theology and doctrine. I learned about their scripture, the word of the Lord, which are the messages said to have come from John the Baptist. And in the fall of 2020, I was baptized into the church and ordained an apostle.
You were baptized and ordained an apostle at the same time?
Yes.
Holy cow, really?
Yes.
This feels like 1830 or something.
Yes. Well, it's funny because the Elijah Message tradition comes kind of from the Temple Lot tradition.
Right.
The Temple Lot tradition basically, and I would say we're very similar to this, basically stops the restoration at 1833. Before that evil man, Sidney Rigdon, whom David Whitmer bashes, came on the scene and ruined everything and got into Joseph Smith's favor and ruined everything. So we're
That's funny. I think Sidney came in about 1831, but 1833, I think, is when he tried to change the name to the Church of the Latter-day Saints, I think is what it was.
Yeah. So, I mean, David Whitmer says that, it starts to go downhill with Sidney Rigdon, but Sidney Rigdon comes in 2 years before he says things start to go downhill. So go figure.
Right.
But anyway, I mean, we're very similar to the Temple Lot Church in that regard. In many ways, we accept the Book of Commandments over the Doctrine and Covenants officially. I still read the Doctrine and Covenants because I came from, the Community of Christ. But
and I was going to ask you, so you never officially joined the Community of Christ then?
I did. I was a member for 5 years. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you did join the Community of Christ.
Yes,
okay.
I joined the Community of Christ. Yep.
You never joined the Bickertonites, though.
I did not join the Bickertonites. Yes.
Now, I know Steve Pineacre has told me that, especially in Florida, the congregation down there is heavily African American. Is it the same in Philadelphia?
For the Bickertonites, yes. So they have one of their apostles. Was one of their early apostles in the early 20th century when segregation was really bad. One of their apostles was a black apostle who was actually a doctor who went to Italian-American neighborhoods and preached the Book of Mormon to people while he was, doing his doctor thing and practicing medicine in these neighborhoods. So there is, in Florida, a lot of the Bickertonite churches are African American. In Philadelphia, the church I went to in the Oxford Valley, half of the congregation was African American, and there were some really old ladies who had been with the Bickertonite church for many, many years. And I'll never forget, one of them prophesied over me and said that I was going to be an apostle and an elder. And it's kind of funny because her prophecy came true, but just not with the Bickertonite church. So, yes.
That's funny. So was it just it was just a few months you met with the Bickertonites and then you Community of Christ?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And so you were with the Community of Christ about 5 years, and then you met with the Elijah Message, and oh wow! And so you joined in 2017. Do I have that right?
I started talking to them in 2017. I joined officially in 2020.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now the first Elijah Message apostle I met was a guy named Paul Savage. Do you know Paul?
I do know Paul. Yes. Paul came to our General Assembly in 2021, and we had a great conversation about, completely unrelated to the restoration, about Elvis, because Paul used to do some press stuff for Elvis, and he told me about, and I'm a big fan of Elvis Presley, and he told me about the concerts he went to and how the worst Elvis concert he ever went to was not an impersonator, but Elvis himself in 1977. When he forgot all his lines and basically ripped his pants. It was really a mess. Really? Yes, I got to talk to him quite a bit about that.
Because I think I talked to Paul. It was my first MHA meeting, I think, in Independence, like 2012, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And he was an apostle at the time, but he's no longer an apostle.
No, he's still. He's not. I think. Do not quote me on this at all. I think he's with the 608 church, but he still does stuff with our church from time to time, and he'll come to General Assembly and stuff. In fact, I met him in Independence when I was there for the General Assembly.
Oh, so he is an apostle still?
No, not with our church, not with the
not with your church, but with his church he is.
Yes, I believe so.
They're kind of like sister churches or something like that, I guess. Kind of.
Yeah, that's a very nice term. That's a very nice way of putting it. So, we in the Assured Way Church believe that we are the official, correct continuation of the church that existed in '94, and that the splinter groups are in error.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Elder Adam Stokes. In our next conversation, we're going to learn more about Otto Fetting and his very famous prophecy.
So there's a famous revelation where Otto Fetting says the cornerstone will be found that was indicated for the temple will be found here, and the temple lot uncovered that and found it. And even to this day, there are some members of the temple lot that will at least accept the first 6 or 12 messages because of that prophecy. If you like what we're doing here on Gospel Tangents, please become a paid subscriber at gospeltangents.com or patreon.com/gospeltangents. We've got full transcripts on our website at gospeltangents.com. And if you'd like to check out some of our other conversations, click over here. Thanks.